Welcome Kerbal Noobs to this Let's Play in which Jeb and I are just going to muck around in sandbox mode and do some stuff with rockets. Now in this case I was watching a tutorial done by Scott Manley. He does loads of great tutorials on Kerbal Space Program, and in this one he was doing career mode and it was showing you how to launch a rocket into space, do some science with just the very basic parts you have early on in career mode. So instead of having launch stabilizers, he's knocked up this sort of ad hoc launch mechanism using the separators and these girder segments, and that's all very well, it's all great, it all works fine, but there was something I missed during the tutorial and I didn't spot it until I watched it 2 or 3 times over. And that is, as most of you will know, solid rocket boosters fire at maximum throttle until they run out of fuel. But not if you change the thrust limiter whilst you're still in the assembly building. And I think he reduced it down to about 40 or so. The idea being that at maximum throttle, 4 solid rocket boosters are going to launch this thing into space so quickly that in the lower part of the atmosphere it'll actually do more harm than good. So by reducing it to 40, you've effectively got a much more efficient rocket, which will obviously get you higher up into the atmosphere and ultimately into orbit. So I thought, why don't we test this theory? So what we're going to do is just simplify this rocket a bit. Let's get rid of this engine, we're not going to need that. Let's just take out this section because all we really want is some dead weight, so let's take that out as well. We don't need that either. So we've got 1.5 units of fuel, 4 rockets, a science module, separator, and obviously the capsule. Now we're just going to be reverting to the vehicle assembly building after each test, so the parachute doesn't really matter that much. But this is going to be our little test craft, and we're just going to launch this multiple times with different thrusts. So as our starter for 10, or in this case starter for 100, we will going to launch with 100% thrust and just see how high we get using maximum thrust from all 4 engines. Now I do have Jeb installed, as you can see. Jeb is a great tool, but all we're going to use is this delta V stats. We're just going to have a look at the bottom section here. We're just going to watch how much delta V we have with this section, and we're just going to find out how much thrust we're getting, how long it's going to last, just as part of our test. Now obviously the first stage, these segments down here don't have any thrust to weight ratio. But let's get ourselves launched. We have no engine, so there's no point in having any thrust set. We'll set on our SAS and we will launch. Now we're going to be shooting up at over 5 thrust to weight ratio. That is way too much. But let's see, we've got 200 meters per second already. Most people think sort of 100 to 150 is probably a good speed for this level of the atmosphere. This is about 10,000 when you'd normally start leaning over to start your gravity turn, and anything above 100, 150 is way too fast. You can see we're already at 500 and we're already getting atmospheric effects, so we're much too fast. So that's kind of proven that, if anything. But let's just see how high we get. So we're going to wait for this to come down to 0, which we can either watch down here or watch up here on the logarithmic scale here. So we're still 160, 50, 40 and 20, so it's starting to slow up. We're getting to 16,000 meters at 50 meters per second, and we're just going to press escape when this goes down to 0 and stop. So that is our height at full thrust. So what that's 16,431. 16,431. So we will revert flight back to the vehicle assembly building, and let's choose, I don't know, 80. Let's go down to something like 80. So that's going to be about here, 83, 82. There we go. That's close enough. And let's repeat this exercise for 80% thrust and see how that does from the launch pad to its highest point. So again, we've got no thrust to weight ratio in this first first girder stage, and we've got 4 point something for our main rocket stage, which is again way too much. But let's see how we do. So still already above 100, 150, so way too fast. And all we're really looking out for now is the start of atmospheric effects, which we're probably going to get. We're just coming up to half fuel. Got 6.5, 6.6 thrust to weight ratio now. It's rocketing up, literally speaking. And 6,000 meters, 400 meters per second. And there you can start seeing we're starting to get these atmospheric effects. And there we go. So way over 500 meters per second. So let's see what maximum altitude we can reach having put in 80 meters. 80 meters? 80% thrust on our 4 solid rocket boosters. So what's that? 200 meters per second, 180, still going up. So we've already exceeded our so far highest altitude of 16. We're going to get up to 19 maybe. Here it comes, ready to press escape as it reaches 0 and stop. There we go. So there we managed to get 19,338. So we can now revert back to the vehicle assembly and let's choose 60% thrust and see how well we do with 60% thrust. That's going to be around about here somewhere. 61, 65, 61. That'll do. It's close enough. So let's go back out to the launch pad. Now again, we're expecting to get a much more efficient launch and maybe not get some of those aerodynamic effects. So let's get the SAS on, turn the throttle off and launch. So we're going straight up again. Already we find ourselves at 100 meters per second, but we've only got 3 point something as our thrust to weight ratio. Now when I've been making rockets, I tend to think about 1.4 is a good compromise of thrust to weight ratio, of actually getting a darn thing off the ground and being too inefficient. Now for those who don't know, a thrust to weight ratio of 1 is the absolute minimum that your rocket actually gets off the platform. Any more than that and you'll be accelerating pretty rapidly. So we're already up to 400 meters per second, we're at 9,000 kilometers, and yeah, we're just about getting some aerodynamic effects. And now we're getting some re-entry effects. We're going so fast, quite high up. So we've actually done pretty well. That was pretty good. So we're still going up at a pretty hefty rate. So what's that? 350 meters per second. We're at 18,000 meters up. And let's just see how far will we get. Yeah, we'll definitely get above 20,000. So again, it's much more efficient launch. We're at 200 meters per second vertical speed, so we're still going up. We're still positive, way positive, 150 meters per second. So we're still going up. Got to 100 meters per second. Still going up. We're starting to decelerate rapidly now. Getting ready to press escape and stop. There we go. So at 60% thrust, we find 23,907. So again, another broken record. Doing this repeated test is a bit of a broken record in itself, but there we go. So we've done 60. Let's try 40. Let's see how fast and how far we can get at 40. So can we get 40, 39, 40? There we go. So let's try 40, which I think is what Scott Manley tried. So let's go back out to the launch pad and let's set this launch going. So here we are on the launch pad. Jeb's ready to rock. Put the SAS on. Kill the throttle because we don't need it. So we've still got a thrust to weight ratio of our rocket stage of 2. And let's go. So the 2's still plenty. 2 will really get most things off the ground pretty sharpish. So That's excellent. So we're already nearing 100 meters per second. Here we go, 100 meters per second, and we're 1,000 meters up. So we can see from the graphics that we've certainly got a lot less thrust, and we've got 45 seconds more thrust to go out of these engines, and we're not going up as rapidly as you would expect. We're 150 meters per second, so we're still probably going a little bit too fast. Thrust to weight ratio of 2 is plenty, but let's just see how high we can get. Half fuel and 6,000 meters. So about a third fuel. Thrust to weight ratio of 4 now. Of course, as your weight goes down, we've still got a constant thrust, so the thrust to weight ratio will go up. And we're going to brake 400 meters per second at 11 kilometers up. Still rising, and thrust and fuel will end now. And I don't think we saw any aerodynamic effects, so we're not going too fast. We saw no re-entry style effects, so that's good. So we're not pushing too hard against the atmosphere, and we're still going up. So 350 meters per second vertical speed, we're still going up, as shown by the meter here. So will we get to, let's say, 30 kilometers, 30,000 meters? We're still going up, 240 meters a second. 28 kilometers up. Getting ready to press escape. 29. Go 150 meters a second. 30, there we go, 30 kilometers up. So that's pretty impressive. That's almost double what we were doing at full throttle. So 50 meters a second, getting ready to press escape. 10 meters a second, 5, stop. So I stopped it a fraction early there, but we made it just a fraction over 31,000. So that's pretty good. That is literally almost double. So whilst I'm not prepared to do the science maths, I can double, which is great. So the only test we can really do now is see how low we can go. So let's try 30. So 29.5, 30. There we go. Let's see 30. So let's go back out to the launch pad and see 30% and see how high that will get this particular load. So here we are. Jeb's coming on board. We put the SAS on. We switch off the thrust. 1.54. So this is pretty good. This is probably the right thrust for this weight, I would have thought. This is what I would have set this particular payload to be. Of course, this probably wouldn't get into orbit. We don't have enough thrust to get us all the way into orbit. We'd need our extra engine in here, and as Scott Manley had it, you'd need the extra fuel sections as well. So this is just an experimental craft. It wouldn't actually get you into orbit. I mean, heaven forbid that I could design anything better than Scott Manley. But this is a good test to see how efficient we can make these engines for a given payload, and just to demonstrate that more power isn't always better. So what have we got? We're at 116, 117, so that's much better speed for this sort of altitude, and we're at 4,000 meters. Thrust to weight ratio of 2, so we've definitely got enough thrust to weight ratio for 40. We've definitely got it for, I'm going to say, a few more percent lower than that as well. So let's see how we can do. We've got another 29 seconds of thrust. Speed is much lower than we were doing earlier. It's with 240 meters a second, coming up on 9,000 kilometers. So is this going to be break even or not? What do you reckon? 13,000 meters, 13 kilometers, still accelerating because we've still got some fuel. 1 and cut. So there we go, 18,000 meters, 500 meters per second. So let's see whether this will surpass our 31,000 meters that we made previously. Speed's coming down, 370, 60, 50, still going up of course, 27 kilometers. Speeds dropping to 250 meters a second. 29 kilometers. 30 kilometers. So I think we're just going to exceed our previous. There we go, 31. And we're now at 100 meters per second vertical speed. Get to 32. And 50 meters per second. And 10 meters per second. And stop. Again, I stopped it a little bit early. So that was 32, 3, 4, 4. So I'm guessing we're not going to be able to get it much lower than that, because we really are beginning to stretch our thrust to weight ratio. So let's just see. So that was 30. Let's try 25. Let's try 20. 20.5. So that barely gets us off the ground. So this is as low as it can go. So 20.5 is absolute as low as it can go. And I'm suspecting we'll now spend so much time thrusting and not much time actually getting into orbit, or at least gaining altitude, that this will now be too low. So again, we put our SAS on, we switch off our thrust, because we can't control the thrust anymore in these engines, they are fixed, and off we go. And there we are, barely getting off the launch pad. So 1.5 or 1.05 was barely enough to get us out of the launch pad. So Jeb's not exactly going to be too excited about this trip. It's going to be a bit like a drive in the country on a Sunday afternoon. So 22 meters per second. In our previous tests, certainly some of our earlier tests, we were well above 100 by this point. And we've still got almost 2 minutes worth of thrust. So we've probably got time for Jeb to get some snacks and to probably read the instruction manual so he knows what he's doing. So there we go, 1 kilometre. 1.34 almost of thrust to weight ratio, and we're still well below 100 meters per second. So yep, this is definitely not going to be breaking any records. 2 kilometers and 1 minute 15 seconds still to go. Time for some sightseeing. Certainly if he's finished the manual, he can do some sightseeing, because we've barely got up to 100 meters per second. Now, as I was saying earlier, this would never get you into space, you could never use this, but if you watch Scott Manew's tutorial, you'll see his original vehicle, which has got the extra fuel and obviously the extra engine. You'll see that get into orbit with plenty of fuel to spare. Circularize, do the science and come back down. So certainly this vehicle, Scott Manley's vehicle, is certainly more than capable of getting into orbit, even without the efficiency of reducing the power in these thrusters. But certainly it's much more efficient if you do that, and it's something you might want to do if you are using a lot of these solid fuel boosters in your designs. It's certainly something I'll be doing, because I just assumed you left them to run, but no. So you learn something new every day. Here we go. So we're getting 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and 0. So we still got above our full thrust altitude, but I don't think we're going to be breaking any records. We're above our 80% thrust, so we're still better than thrusting at 80%, but we're not going to get to 23, I don't think. So this is still not as good as 60%. So it's pretty good. We've done some pretty good science here for Kerbal Space Program, that is. So let's get ready to press escape, and here we go. 10 meters per second and stop. There we go. So 22.803, I think that was. Well, I think we did pretty well there. We did some pretty good science. I think we demonstrated that yes, it is more efficient to reduce the power in solid rocket boosters, and obviously if you're using liquid fuel you've probably got the same issues with efficiency if you've got more thrust than you need. So that's a lesson well learnt for me. I've been Viruk, I've been playing with Jeb and rockets. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.